Well, greetings and thanks for joining us today on another episode of Lightbulb Moments, episode number 133. We are live stream on YouTube, and go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel to check out past episodes, of which a few of them I'm going to highlight for you in just a moment here. I'm Tom Kuhn. I'm host and curator of Lightbulb Moments. I'm also the founder and CEO of Cunity. What is a light bulb moment? Well, to me, a light bulb moment is a moment of sudden realization, enlightenment, or inspiration. And in the words of Bruce Springsteen, you can't start a fire without a spark. Hopefully today we'll get a spark that will spur you into action to take a light bulb moments and maybe help you go from a state of confusion, overwhelm, too much going on, etc., into a clearer path to prosperity, whatever that looks like for you. Remember to prosper, manage your ATM, the three currencies we have in life: attention, time, and money. And thanks for spending your precious time with us, whether you're live or watching this on YouTube or listen to the podcast. We love hearing from you with guest suggestions, light bulb moments of your own. Stay connected with us and feel free to use the chat very actively today. It is monitored. We do love comments. It does kind of fuel the conversation along. So please do use the chat, even if it's a random thought here and then. Just engage in a dialogue with us. Today we have Tony Gordon, multi-location salon owner and Cosmetology Chicago board member, and a friend that I've known for a long time. A lot more about Tony in a little bit. We'll invite him to the mic in a few minutes, but I'm glad to have Tony as a guest finally. And I'm glad to get into a topic that I think is really cool and I'm super curious about. So I'm dying to bring Tony to the mic in a couple minutes. We had an episode 2 weeks ago with Garrison Neal that is available on our podcast as well as YouTube. Check that one out. We had a session, I believe it was 3 or 4 weeks ago, with Kelly Eilers. That felt a little bit like a masterclass in marketing, really rich in content episode. And then we had my friend Roderick Samuels on probably about a month ago. And boy, I love this guy's passion, commitment, love and energy. And it was the second time I had Roderick, and I'm going to have him back again soon. I was on last week. I spent a little bit of time talking about awards and recognitions, sort of a macro view of them and a micro view, and then also got into this topic of succession planning, which is very top of mind for me, leading into Sunday, a workshop that we're having on the eve of 2 to 10. It's an exit workshop, but the true title is more of a succession workshop. And this is for businesses, individuals, current and future owners looking to grow or go or let go. And we're going to go through quite a bit of meat in the sense of things like valuations. I've got some new valuation data that I haven't shared before, 5 keys to business valuations and what to do about them. And so anyway, I'm excited. So my mind is pretty deep into that because I'm almost done with the course, which will be our 5th formal course. Succession planning, well overdue, probably 6, 7, 8 years in the making. And the overview of it will be on Sunday. Leadership conference, the 2 to 10 leadership conference starts on Monday and Tuesday in Atlanta. Welcome reception Sunday night. I think we're pretty well set. We have a larger group than we did last year. A great group. The agenda and the conversation starters, the speakers, the data, it's good. It's really good. So I can't wait. And I know the team's done an amazing job getting ready for this, especially Michelle Schuster and Heath Smith, as well as JP and other members of the team. So a lot of work going into that, and we'll get to see that hard work come to fruition very soon. Don't forget to check out Money 02 episodes by Aaron. And then also we have added some dates for our execution 2-day workshop. It's one of our signature workshops. It is coming up November 13th and 14th in Minnesota. It's super convenient. It's right by the airport. The hotel's affordable, but most importantly is what people are taking away from this workshop. Perfect time of year for those of you that are thinking about next year, and make sure that next year's a year that you get more done than you got done this year, because you have simple and visual tools to get things done. We call it the gritty art of getting things done. It's very tool rich, and it is coming up in a live in-person workshop very soon. My light bulb moment last session really dealt with celebration and awards, micro and macro. So micro is really within the business, the different celebrations and awards you do on an annual basis, as well as on a more frequent basis. And certain keys to that whole dialogue was around, be careful about what you celebrate. You want to celebrate multiple different areas if you have multiple different areas of value in your business. Too many have celebration and awards that are completely driven by sales performance, which you're on board with, but they forget about creativity, customer service, community, and the other values. So a little bit about that as far as and when to have them, how to have them, et cetera. And then macro was really about the state of awards in the beauty industry today, and just some commentary from myself and some of the things that I think we're yearning for from an awards standpoint to properly recognize and bring credibility to the amazing small business owners in this industry. So that was the episode last week. My light bulb moment this week is really, I'm reserving it for just a conversation with Tony here. And in prepping for Tony, he has brought this concept of flow into his mind share quite a bit. And so we're going to talk about it a little bit, but to me, I mean, I'm waiting for a light bulb moment because it's such an awesome topic. So anyway, Tony, let's bring you to the mic and let's get into our conversation.
Hello, Tom. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you, Tony. You and I have known each other a long time. You are as it says in your bio, you're a multi-location salon owner, 4th generation hairstylist, also Chicago Cosmetology board member. You're also part of 2 to 10. You've been a very regular 2 to 10 member for many, many years. And that's how we got to know each other quite a bit. Trips to Boston and all that stuff, you and Pam and Michael. And we'll see you again this weekend, which is great.
Right.
You've also got some street credit from a creative standpoint, probably earlier in your career, but let's really talk about the legacy that you stepped into as Tony Gordon, being 4th generation, and you have quite the lineage here. Talk a little bit about your father and industry, background, you getting in the industry.
Yeah, really, I'm a 4th generation hair designer. My great grandmother was a wig maker. And my grandmother was one of the top colorists in Chicago and principal of the American Beauty Academy. And then my dad, of course, a lot of people know who Jerry Gordon was. And he set a great example. My sister is a hairdresser in Hollywood and has done a lot of famous movies like Ocean's 11 and many, I can't even remember the names, but won a BAFTA. There's a lot of hair is in the veins. A lot of discussion about hair over the dinner table. And when I came into the industry, I saw a lot of things happen, like all of us, that were just astounding. And so for a long time, I've looked for solutions to those things, especially about the number of people that came and went. People that went to beauty school and then didn't make it. And I attributed a lot of that to training, failure to train. Yeah.
So a little bit more. So you, of course, you have your, a previous family, previous generation, and of course, Jerry Gordon, very, very well known. But you've made a name for your own. You've carved your own space in the universe, and you're really very active in the industry, and so you fill those shoes very well. And I do want to say one other thing, where you're located. So Tony is based in the Chicago area, including a salon in Highland Park, Illinois, my hometown. So Tony, thanks for being a guest today. Okay. So I got wind from you maybe a year ago or something, that you were started to talk quite a bit about the concept of flow. And I had some familiarity with it. And I've taken a master class by Stephen Kotler. I'm familiar with Mihai. I can't pronounce his last.
Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. He's
I'm
the
going to let you get into all of that.
godfather of flow. Yeah.
So, so I'm really interested in this topic, and I want to explore that with you. And what really caught my attention is that how you really want to apply, how you see how this applies to training, managing people, peak performance, et cetera. So just let's take this in bite-sized chunks. First of all, just give us a general description of flow and the current and past thought leaders.
So flow is really about being in the zone. And the thing about being in the zone is it's not just a psychological thing, it's a neurological thing, meaning that certain parts of the brain turn on, certain parts of the brain turn off. There's certain neurochemicals that occur, and there's ways that we can train people. There's ways that we can do things to enhance our own flow. And so there's a series of triggers for flow where you can induce it. There's also group flow, and group flow can also be, you can't force it, but you can induce it in your salons by the end of this. I hope we can get to those. Yeah, so flow is really a higher state of being. Can I just say this, that, I have pursued for many years, accelerated learning. I've self-help. I've walked on coals with like Tony Robbins and done many self-help things along the way, because I was always looking for a way to accelerate my own learning. And this is what I saw in the salon industry. A lot of people were just failing out, right? They just were failing out. And then when I saw flow, I'm like, this is it. This is actually the solution to a lot of the things that I had been thinking about for many, many years.
Tell us a little bit about Mihai.
Mihai Csikszentmihalyi was a Hungarian immigrant who survived World War II. He was the head of psychology at the University of Chicago. And he had been writing books about flow and how it enhances creativity, productivity, speed of learning from the time, like the 60s, until like last year. He died last year, actually. And so, yeah, and it really took off in the 90s. It got really big because there started to be tools by which you could verify that flow is actually occurring in the brain. So fMRIs and MRIs and PET scans and all those other kinds of devices they use, I'm not a scientist, were actually verifying that flow was verifying the things he was saying all along.
Yeah, I first heard about him as it applied to creativity. So let's get to Stephen Kotler, who has really picked up on this work and really has become a new thought leader. So just spend 60 seconds, a little bit about Stephen Kotler.
Yeah, I'm in deep with Stephen Kotler. He created a program, which maybe some of you have seen. It's called 0 to Dangerous, where you can go from no flow to a whole lot of flow in his course. And there's also various other training courses that he has. It's become a huge company. He has, I don't know, 12 or 15 best-selling books. He's a prolific writer. I mean, he writes a lot about flow. One of the first one that really grabbed my attention was something called Stealing Fire, where he describes right from the outset about how groups come together, especially highly trained groups like Navy SEALs, and how well they work, how well they function together, and how they really become in sync and trained to each other. This happens in the salon. It happens in group salons, not in independents, not where some booth renters out there doing it, but groups.
So let's break this apart. And you mentioned that you felt that flow applied to several areas like training, managing people, and peak performance. Let's do it just one at a time. So training, how would the flow type of thinking and state actually apply to training within a salon?
I think the most important element, like I said, there's really a 12 individual flow triggers, but maybe the first one that's the most important. It's not the first one, but it is probably the most important one, is the challenge skills balance. So when you're taking someone through, and you could think of learning to do hair or anything for that matter as a series of individual tasks. And if you're learning a task, you may be knowing nothing initially. And so you could be, if somebody throws you in the water and says swim, you could drown, you know. So you have high anxiety in regard to swimming, right? Or doing this haircut, doing this blow dry, you know, the fear level is quite high. So you take people through, like we do on mannequins, and show them diagrams and all those kinds of things, and then we set them off on a path. But the path can be very long to get to mastery. And if you think, going back to, and this was part of my journey, as I read things like Malcolm Gladwell, who talked about 10,000 hours, right? The 10,000 hours to mastery. Well, it's not necessarily 10,000 hours for everybody. You know, it depends on the quality of your leadership, your mentoring. But let's use that as a guide. A lot of it has to do with being in this challenge skills balance. So if you're training people to do things, whether it's use Vish, train somebody on the front desk, do a graduated bob, whatever it is, you have to take it with a certain amount of push that, first of all, creates some level of difficulty, but not too much, and not too little where it's just boring for them. And so you have to exist sort of in this channel of challenge and skill, right there in the beginning. So, and the person can move usually at about a 4% rate is kind of the magic number. So according to the flow thinkers, I know this is really in the weeds, but it's important, and it's a good takeaway right away, is that you shouldn't really push your people greater than 4% at a time. Now, for some people, maybe this is 8, and somebody else it's 1%, you know, but it means, like, if I'm going to train somebody on a graduated bob, maybe it takes 90 minutes to do normally, like if they're totally new. If I want them to do it 4% faster, say, then maybe it would be not 90 minutes, an hour and a half, but maybe more like 87 minutes or 86 minutes. So I'm gonna stair step people in so I don't freak them out too much, right? You don't want to take them too far. And if at the end of 87 minutes the quality wasn't high enough, you wouldn't go down to 83. Maybe you keep them at 87. Right. So it's really about stair stepping them in. But there's a lot of triggers before that. Is there passion there? Is there curiosity there? You know, are there all the other factors that are basically like the, you know, all the other triggers that flow talks about, you know, that are like, are the goals clearly set? Is there enough autonomy? You don't need a lot of autonomy as a flow trigger. You need enough autonomy to let them feel like they have some level of autonomy, even though they're in a training phase. So there's a lot of different elements to this. And the biggest one of all, I would say, is deep embodiment. And that's something that we have in the hairdressing business. We're kind of like, this is why flow is so big in sports and music, because we're integrating our full body, and there's an action and awareness that comes together.
So I asked about training, and I think you gave an example. Do you have another example, like in your business, very tangible and specific, about how you used flow, like before we did this, after we did that, and it was because of flow? And if one doesn't come to mind, that's fine. I just thought I'd ask you that.
I think it's more like our training process. You know, like I just present, we have a training team, and I told them about the research on this, and they adjusted to it.
Okay.
You know, they're not trying to make someone go from an hour haircut to a 30-minute haircut. You know, they're not, they're slowly doing it. And I think it's important to maintain psychological safety for people. There's a lot of anxiety and a lot of struggle that occurs in everything that you start new. I don't care if we want to start playing piano at this age, Tom. I don't know if you'd want to. Maybe you already do. I wouldn't doubt that. But but if we wanted to, there might be a lot of fear around it, a lot of struggle, and a lot of frustration. Imagine people feel that at every age.
So with the training, then it's really more of a mindset that your trainers now have in working with team, right? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, and they develop their curriculum to adjust for this.
Gotcha. Okay. So is the time of the curriculum changed, or is it more just the approach within the existing curriculum?
I think it's the same.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. All right. You also mentioned that flow has an impact on managing people. And, so let's unpack that one for a little bit.
So there's something called group triggers. So if you're working with people, and I believe that beyond Stephen Kotler, there is a great researcher out of the Netherlands, out of Amsterdam. His name is J.J. Van de Hout, and he looked at the 10 group triggers. Some people may say now there's 26. I think Stephen Kotler is saying there's 26, but originally the discussion was about 22, 10 of them being for group triggers. And can I just reel them off real quick?
Sure.
There's shared goals, shared risk, familiarity, like the people that you're with. There's equal participation in the group, close listening, autonomy again, blended egos, open communication, complete concentration, and this thing called yes and. And if you could get that down, and this is what J.J. Van de Hout did. He basically said there's 7 prerequisites to flow. And this is what we did. We created a poster with these 7, and they're prerequisites to group flow, to team flow. These terms are somewhat interchangeable. That we just posted in the back, because you can't force it. You can bring the horse to water. But if you do all these 7, I think you're going to get flow. You're going to get flow in any team. It's not just about hair salons, but you see this in great bands. You see this in great sports teams. And definitely it happens in salons where people work together and they kind of rely on each other. Like there's assistants and there's desk people, and everybody's like involved in this dance, if you will, on the floor. A lot of people do this naturally without knowing any of this, because this is the human condition. This is what we do. So you want to know the 7?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So the first one is a collective ambition. And so rather than a mission statement, this is like the group comes together and creates their own collective ambition. And sometimes this is real challenging, but if you do it, I've got a way to do it where it can be done quickly, because sometimes they go off the rails. But basically everybody agrees this is why we're here and this is what we're doing this month. Then there's a group goal. And that group goal is usually set by the leader. Could be anything, like a numerical. It's usually numerical. And then you align the individuals to the group goal. Like you go to each person and says, like, for instance, one of my managers this month says she wants to raise her pre-book. She's all about raising pre-book, and she's actually done it. Like she went to each person and said, what are you going to do to be part of this? And they're up like 20 points. It's amazing in their aligned personal goals. So there's collective ambition, there's group goals, there's an aligned personal goal. 4th is high task integration. And this is where this happens a lot in our industry, where people take a seminar, say on Sunday or Monday, and they come back Tuesday morning, and now they know something. They're a different person. And the rest of the staff is still treating them like they know nothing. And so we have to understand that this person now may know more. They may have a higher quality set of skills, but high skill integration and being able for everybody in the moment in a crazy, what's called a VUCA moment. VUCA is kind of a military term. We have VUCA in the salon. It's basically a high situation like volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Like you have this, that's usually a military term, but we have it in the salon. There's a lot of crazy stuff that goes on. We all know this. So in the moment, you could say, so-and-so can do that shampoo, or this other person cannot. Okay. So if we all know what everybody else can do, then the day is integrated and it can work even in a highly volatile environment, I would say. Okay. Then there's number 5 is open communication. This is how your group really starts to learn very quickly. They can be called out very fast, as long as you have psychological safety, which is the next one. You need psychological safety in your group so that you don't lose people quickly. That's what I saw a lot of when I first started in this industry. I saw a lot of people say goodbye at the very early onset. We still have a lot of that that's happening across our industry because they didn't feel safe in the environment. They weren't there to really learn it yet. And then lastly is mutual commitment. You always have people coming and going, I think, in our industry. You know, somebody's moving across the country, but can you be here with us this particular time frame and be completely on board with us right now, even though you're planning on moving across the country next month. But since you're here now, can you be fully involved with who we are and what we're doing?
So with those 7, sticking with managing people here, which of them maybe resonates the most with your team? I mean, where's maybe the biggest shift in your team? I mean, frame it in one of these.
I think it's open communication.
Okay.
We are, I just gave a soft skills class on helping people create feedback loops for juniors to create feedback loops for themselves. Mm-hmm. Feedback loops will accelerate someone's training. So if you have, think about when you have a personal trainer and you have such a close connection with them that they're actually saying that you trust them entirely. And whatever advice they're giving, you're taking that and you're adjusting your body and your movements and everything else like that. If you have that kind of relationship in the salon, like a mentor like that is giving you feedback regularly, and you can, where they feel safe to give it to you so that the newbie doesn't quit, and the person feels safe enough to ask so that they are not being insulted and they're not being they're not ready to leave over it, then what is happening is when you get that relationship going, you have an acceleration and the person's getting better and better and better is the idea. And it's happening in a very quick way. It's not going to be 10,000 hours before they get to mastery. It's going to be much, much shorter. So you think with a flow approach, part of it will be when we talked about training, what you're saying is it actually could accelerate training too. According to DARPA. So DARPA, the defense, it's the military, it's the think tank for the Defense Department. DARPA's come up with everything from like Siri to like the internet. They've invented most of our advances that have made us amazing at what we who we are and what we do.
And by the way, just pause there for a second, because you were in the military, weren't you?
I was in the Air Force. Yes.
You were in the Air Force. I was very surprised to hear that you were in the Air Force for how long?
I was active duty for 4 years, and then I was in the reserves. I was a weekend warrior for 15 years.
Wow, and I had no idea. I only learned that.
Okay, so we were talking about my family, and
yeah.
Coming out of high school, I wanted to do anything but this. Okay. So I grew up talking hair and salons around the dinner table, of course. And, my grandmother was a hairdresser. My dad was a hairdresser. Everybody worked in the salons. So I went in the military right out of high school and
Mm.
then went to college for 4 years. So then I worked at the options exchange in Chicago and did a lot of finance. And then there was a huge crash. Everybody lost their jobs. And my dad said, why don't you come into the salon business? I think you'll like it. And the first day I figured out, you know what? He was right.
Wow.
Yeah.
I actually have known you a very long time, but I never heard the full story behind that. So anyway, I did want to call out that you actually have some credibility on the military side here too. So keep going with what you were talking about there, because
So
we're talking about
DARPA,
accelerating training. Yep.
DARPA did a study based on people becoming marksmen, shooting. So they took people who had not had any experience at all um, in shooting, and then they put them into a brain state where they suppress their prefrontal cortex, which is pretty much what happens in flow. In flow, your prefrontal cortex, the front part of your brain goes silent naturally. But here they actually did some activation where they went silent, and then they got them to be marksmen 200% quicker than other training methodologies.
Wow. Okay.
It's been shown in a bunch of other ways too. I don't think, though, I will say this, I don't think we've proven that at Gordon Salon. Like, I don't think we've proven yet that we have been able to accelerate anyone's training yet. That one I don't see, but I do see increases in productivity and creativity, which I think is attributable to flow.
So let's go to productivity next. And where you're saying that you in training, it might not be a great correlation, but you're seeing a correlation of productivity. Let's talk about that.
I'm seeing people who, and you guys are probably all seeing this in your salons, that people who are deep in what they're doing, and you probably feel this yourself, have dramatic increases in productivity. The research does show that there was a McKinsey study that showed a 500% increase in productivity among executives when they're in flow. I feel it. I'm trying to write a book right now. I feel it when I drop into flow. I feel like I'm getting a lot more done. Anytime you get really focused, and we've all experienced this in some way, I hope everyone's experienced it before. When you drop into a highly focused state, you get a lot done. It's like, you're going down a narrow pathway and you just accelerate down that highway, just like, and there's brain science behind why that occurs. It's happening. It can also be induced. Or it can be mimicked. This is why people like to get high so much, okay? Because it can be mimicked. It's a feel-good chemical. There's a bunch of feel-good chemicals around flow.
I love the term drop in, and it's recently come to mind for me this summer. I was listening to a podcast, and that was her whole shtick was, time to drop in. So talk about dropping in. Because to me, that could be a very easy mantra and a trigger for someone to come into a flow state just on words.
Right, that's true. I mean, initially, I think it's really good to have a couple things set up. Number one is that you're really passionate about whatever the topic is. Like, you really are into it, and you have enough curiosity still around it that you're really focused in on it. And so number two is, and this is big for me, is that you're going to have really clear goals. Like, so if you're doing an individual flow thing, like you wake up in the morning and you want to do athletics or write or whatever that thing is, where you're going to drop in and have that deep work time. Cal Newport wrote a book about deep work. I think that really is a good indication of where this goes. Maybe there's people who are listening to this who drop in and go and pay the bills, or you know, and the rest of the time they're out on the floor or something. Maybe that's where they find their flow. And they seem to get a lot done when no one else is around and they are just really, really in it. Okay. And they have a clear goal, like I'm going to pay all these bills, you know, in 20 minutes, and they get it done. Right. So I think that and they made the decision to be there, which means they have that level of autonomy, that kind of thing.
You mentioned environment too, like the example of paying bills where you cut off all distractions. So I'm sure there's an environmental aspect to inducing this dropping in and flow. But let's talk about the book a moment here now. So you're passionate enough about this subject that you're writing a book on it. And are you suggesting it's specifically for the salon industry?
My version is,
Yeah.
yes, because people go into flow behind the chair, and I think it's important to think about it from these perspectives. That, you know, your brain is probably the most important part of your body in regard to doing hair, and also it happens behind the desk. It happens really in every field, but to look at it specifically from this perspective, and then how to train people properly, and then also to let them run once they do get to the mastery level, and to help people stay on track so they don't get lost in that, is what this book is about, and how it can go off the rails too,
Yeah.
because there can be negative flow as well. There can be negative things that occur in flow.
Well, good luck on this project. You'll have to keep us posted.
Yeah.
A couple other things before we wrap up here. You know, I think that it seems to me you got into this a little bit because you yourself were, you know, craving flow. And you mentioned this is something you've been looking for 30 years, and that's tough to go into the zone. So I'm sure a lot of this is your own personal exploration.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think one of the best ways that I drop into flow is that I am very directed towards using a timer. So I'll use what's called the Pomodoro technique, basically setting a timer. But if you can, for those of you who can sit down and like really be very focused for a particular amount of time, there is a correlation with flow and a sleep cycle. So it's about 90 minutes. So if you can get 90 minutes every morning to be by yourself, you can probably write a book, no problem. Okay. If you can gear it towards your workouts or whatever it is that you need to do for your alone time, that's great. That really helps you. And some people are going to have a much easier time of it. I've always struggled with it, and that's why I pursued it to such a degree. I do think there is a little bit of discipline and grit that you need here to get through the struggle phase. There is a big struggle phase whenever you start something new, like we talked about when you have a new hairdresser, or if we're going to try to play the piano. That struggle phase makes people quit. They quit things all the time. That's why we didn't get through math class, you know, because it was hard, right? But if we had a little bit more grit, you know, we might have been able to get through that. And there is a grit index that we should all probably see how we do on it. But it's been really nice to be able to find this, because this is really the key to a whole lot of things.
Tony, you've been a great guest. Everybody, let's give him a virtual round of applause. Tony, we have the $1 million light bulb that coming your way. You're officially a member of our brain trust. So thanks, Tony. We'll see you this weekend. Bravo. Thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Tom. Appreciate it.
All right.
See you this weekend.
Sounds great. All right. So let's see here. We'll wrap up here. I want to thank Lightheart Sanders. I don't know if we have any members of the Lightheart Sanders team today, but they're great sponsors, as well as Ally Health. And, we have the community money related curriculums, of which we have for students, for professionals and owners. And a reminder to join us every Wednesday. I do believe we're off next week because of 2 to 10. Then we wrap right up, we pick up right in the week after that. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can search out Cunity. Love hearing from you. Love that you joined us today. And we will see you on the next go around. Don't forget to submit a light bulb moment of your own, or let me know if you have one, and we will see you very soon. Thanks again.
Thanks, Tom.